Hello and good morning, everybody. Happy Tuesday, May the 12th. Can you guys believe it? We are just making our way right on to the end of this year. I want to tell you guys you've done a great job. Make sure that you are checking the grade book. I am slowly putting in all of these Metamorphosis grades because I know you guys have 7 full classes. Some of you have an AP here or there that you're having to prepare for. It is important that you make sure that in any extra time you have that you have completed Metamorphosis day 1 through day 10. Okay, that is the big chunk of our goal. And if you have completed all of those days, you should be proud of yourself. You have read a novella, right, which is a short novel by Franz Kafka, one of the great writers. It was like if you were reading it in a normal book, it's about 120 pages. Of course, we read it a little bit differently, but I hope that you kind of liked it, okay? All right, so for today's activity, you'll see up here on the screen, you are going to be answering this question. So after watching this video, and we're going to talk about a couple things, are you more sympathetic for Gregor and the impact his transformation has on him? Or are you more sympathetic for Gregor's family, the sister, mother, and the father, who had to deal with Gregor's transformation? Okay, so both of them, right, both groups, Gregor and then Gregor's family, had to endure some hardship as a result of this transformation. So this is most definitely an opinion question, right? It kind of matters how you read it and how you interpret it. So there's no right or wrong way to answer this question as long as you do these 4 things in your answer, okay? So in your sentence 1, right, we're just trying to get back to our basics here. In our sentence 1, clearly answer the question. So you would say, I am more sympathetic for Gregor's family and the impact of Gregor's transformation on him. Okay, clear, direct answer. Then go to your sentence 2 where you tell me that why, right? Where you give me that Gregor's family was more impacted because, okay, and then fill that in with why you believe that to be true. Okay, and then sentence 3, you're going to reference something from the text. Now this is a long text, so I don't want you going back and finding a direct quote unless you want to use one of the ones in the video later, but just reference a moment in the story. Okay, so if you're more sympathetic for the family because all of them had to go out and get jobs, right, you could just reference that. You could say Greta had to go out and become a salesperson, right? The mother had to start sewing, and the father had to go back to work, right? So if that's the reason why that text supports your answer, you can use that. And then in the last sentence, all you're doing is reinforcing and explaining why you chose that part in the text, right? Where you give me that because. Okay, so just 4 sentences, and make sure that you do these 4 things. Remember, you do not have to use a direct quote as long as you just reference a point in the story. Okay, that actually supports what you're going to say. You're just going to type your answer here, and once you're done, right, you'll have a little submit button up top. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into some reflection and review, some information that might guide you in how you want to answer this question. All right, so let's first talk about symbols, right? So symbols. Symbols tell us something deeper that the author is trying to show us, right? Oftentimes when we're giving that first quick read through something, we may pick up on these, but once we go back and look at a story or think about a story, we find that they have deeper meaning, right? And they explain something the author is trying to convey to the reader. Okay, so now some symbols, like biblical symbols, you know, the apple being the whole Adam and Eve thing, are pretty much concrete. So when an author uses certain symbols, we already know the meaning. Okay, but other ones we have to interpret, right? So let's first think about how Gregor is transformed into a vermin, right? A vermin we think of as this kind of gross, not cute thing, right? That is low life, usually, okay? So this vermin in our story that Gregor has been transformed into represents Gregor's degraded and dehumanized state that he has come to, okay? So this transformation was the physical manifestation of how he was feeling emotionally and internally, right? His job was making him, he hated it, right? He felt like he wasn't making any lasting human connections. He was traveling constantly worried about getting to work and going to work, right? Even in the beginning when he realized he was transformed, all he could think about was work, okay? And another symbol that we got is dust in Gregor's room, okay? So Gregor's room throughout the course of the story, if you think it got dirtier and dirtier, right? At one point, Gregor started like crawling on the walls, okay? Which caused these like gross sort of insect lines to be all over his walls. Remember his sister came in and wanted to move the furniture so that he would have more room. But his mother protested that and was like, by taking the furniture away, won't it seem like we're showing that we've given up on all hope of improvement and we're abandoning him to cope with himself? I think it'd be best to leave the room exactly the way it was before so that when Gregor comes back to us again, he'll find everything the way it was, okay? So this shows us that the family, or at least the mother, doesn't really think Gregor is inside of that vermin, right? But because we had that third person narration, we know that Gregor is having human thoughts and human feelings, but it seems like as this dust is building and time is going on, he's starting to lose what makes him human, okay? The dust also represents his transformation, and then also his neglect, right? His sister and the cleaning lady sort of stop coming in there and really mopping and sweeping and cleaning, and they just start like shoving food in through the door and then closing it really tight. So it shows the disconnect that is growing between him and his family, okay? And it shows us that loss of humanity over time, right? So he's transformed into a vermin. He's dehumanized through this new state of being, and now the dust and the distance that is growing between him and his family is showing us that loss of humanity and what makes him Gregor, right? And if we think about what is the cause of all of this, there's a lot of things, right? It could be just pure hate for his job, but it could also be the troubles of the new life, right? The troubles that he had to take on all of the responsibility and burden for his family, and now these things are symbolizing that impact, okay? Let's think about themes, okay? So remember, themes are those big picture ideas, big messages that come across to us, the reader, Okay? So a big theme that I want you guys to think about as you answer this question and as we leave this story is alienation in modern life. Okay, so while the Samsa life doesn't necessarily seem super modern to us because we think of our life as modern, right? We have cell phones, we have cars, we have airplanes, we don't have to take the train, right? This life for Gregor and his family is modern, right? Because the family is able to go out to work and then you bring money back into the home to enrich your life, right? That's the whole idea of modern. Oh. Alienation. Why does that keep pulling up? Alienation. Alienation, I think. Well, in modern life. Okay? So this idea that, remember alienation, think of like an alien being out there all alone, right? It's devoid of happiness and human connection, right? Think about in the beginning of the text when Gregor was like, what a strenuous career that I have chosen. Traveling day in and day out, doing business like that takes much more effort than doing your own business at home, right? He has to work for somebody else. He doesn't get to be his own boss. And on top of all that, there's the curse of traveling, worries about making train connections, bad and irregular food, contact with different people all the time so that they can never get to know anyone or become friendly with them. It can all go to hell, right? So in this quote, we see Gregor does not particularly like his job, right? And the important part, I think, here to pull out is the contact with different people all the time so that you can never really become friendly with them, right? This emphasizes that Gregor was feeling all alone, right? And think about in supporting his family, he took on the lead role of that, right? So later when Gregor started our narrator really started explaining how Gregor got into this position of being the sole caretaker, he says, their business misfortune had reduced the family to a state of total despair, and Gregor's only concern at the time had been to arrange things so that they could all forget about it as quickly as possible. Right? So maybe Gregor took on this responsibility, but maybe didn't realize how big of a piece he bit off, right? So he started working especially hard with a fiery vigor that raised him from a junior salesman to a traveling representative almost overnight, bringing with it the chance to earn money in quite different ways. Gregor converted his success at work straight into cash that he could lay on the table at home for the benefit and the astonishment of his delighted family, right? So Gregor was able to step up and sort of save the family. He wanted to be that hero, but as a result of that, he became alone, right? All right. And then we also see that alienation in modern life carries through all of these symbols, right? The dust in his room, him being a vermin, okay? Another symbol that I want to talk about is Gregor's father's uniform. Now, this was something that got sort of an unusual amount of attention for the fact that it's just his uniform, right? Why did he talk about it so much? But if we go back to the text and we think about the change in Gregor's father, right? It symbolized his father's transformation, right? So his father had to deal with the fact that he could no longer support his family. So he became this like mean homebody who always had this like scruffed up hair. And who never ever left the house, right? So he had a drop in ego, right? He maybe wasn't feeling like himself because he wasn't the sole provider anymore. So he was standing up straight. Remember, this is when Gregor sort of peeked out of his room and saw his father in his new uniform. So he was standing up straight enough now, dressed in a smart blue uniform with gold buttons, the sort worn by the employees at the banking institute. Above the high, stiff collar of the coat, his strong, right, that's a word we haven't, that's a descriptive word there. His strong double chin emerged under the bushy eyebrows. His piercing dark eyes looked out fresh and alert, right? So now we're getting adjectives that describe Gregor's father not as like mean and slumped down, but strong, fresh, and alert. His normally, before he had to go back to work, unkempt white hair was combed down, painfully close to his scalp. Right, so Gregor, even being this vermin, noticed a change in his father. And his father's uniform is that symbol that Kafka was using to show us that transformation. Okay? And then another symbol I want to talk about is springtime. Wish my would stop going down. So springtime. March, right? Right now we are in full spring season, and you'll notice that with the trees and the weather, right? Everything is perfect. But towards the end of our text, when Gregor is fading away and dying, it is spring, okay? And this springtime represents a new beginning for the family. Okay, it's a symbol of that. So this is when Gregor died and left the family, which symbolizes the hope and renewal as the three family members have overcome the hardships and look forward to a brighter future. All right, please excuse my typing. I'm trying to type fast so that and look forward to a brighter future, right? It's like they can shed off this burden of Gregor, and while now they have their 3 jobs, they realized at the end when they were talking to each other that actually they're not gonna be so hard off, right? That their 3 jobs are gonna support them, and that they're gonna be able to get an apartment that they can afford. And they look at their daughter now, and they see that she herself has transformed, almost struck simultaneously with the thought of how their daughter was blossoming, transforming into a well-built and beautiful young lady. Okay, so really think about this transformation of literally Gregor, but Gregor is not our only character who goes through one, right? We have all of these symbols and these themes that carry us through the story to drop us these hints and these ideas. But who transforms and who does it benefit, right? It seems our family is going to be better off towards the end of this. But also, if we reflect on Gregor's transformation, yes, his was definitely more grotesque and difficult. But was it the out that he needed, or the push that his family needed to become happier, right? At the beginning of the story, we do not get this picture that his family is in a good place. Gregor seems to be very meek, right? Remember, she was standing at the door crying. His mother came to the door very timid. And his father just seemed very angry and sort of dampening of the apartment. And Gregor was most certainly not happy. But now at the end of the story, we do kind of get a little bit of happiness in a strange way, right? And then if we look back at Gregor's sort of last moments in this story and read what it says. If it was possible, he felt that he must go away even more strongly than his sister, right? Because remember, his sister just sort of got fed up and started yelling, we've got to get rid of it. We've got to let go of the idea that that is Gregor because that is not Gregor. He remained in this state of empty and peaceful rumination, right, reflection, until he heard the clock tower strike 3 in the morning. He watched as it slowly began to get light everywhere outside the window too. Then, without his willing it, his head sank down completely, and his last breath flowed weakly from his nostrils. Okay, so we definitely get the image that Gregor has died here. All right, so there was one last thing to think about as I leave you with this story is, was Gregor really transformed? Okay, reflect on that just a little bit. Do you think that his transformation into a horrible vermin could be Kafka's representation of maybe his inner emotional state? Or do you think we as the reader are expected to just accept that this can happen and then use that transformation to interpret back on his physical and emotional state? Okay, something to think about. But today your task, okay, is this question. Okay, and you're going to have today and tomorrow, of course. Are you more sympathetic for Gregor and the impact his transformation had on him? Right, think about how frustrated and mad he was and how neglected he became, how the dust represented that, right? Remember the apple that was lodged into his back and the pain that he is in. And it seems like maybe this transformation was rooted in the burden he took on for his family. Or are you more sympathetic for Gregor's family, who sort of had to endure this, right? Remember, they had to bring in tenants. They were all very sad. They weren't eating. They had to take on new jobs. And while all that worked out, this question is asking you the impact of the transformation, okay? So then make sure you follow this direct guideline. Okay, so it's 1, 2, 3, and 4. Put your answer there, submit it. You'll have today and tomorrow to complete this. Okay. All right, guys, well, have a wonderful, wonderful day today and tomorrow, and I will see you again soon.